Okay, in our last video, we did a demo of how to show a case submission and agent processing of that by keeping the conversation really tight-knit to both the agent and submitter, but proxied through Centro so that agents don't get inundated with questions. And we did that via these sort of controlled environments of how to create cases very specifically and not DMing the agent or posting it to a random channel. Okay, so how do we set this up? We're going to start with the Centro side. So make sure to watch the last video and make sure you have the context of how the implementation will work. But here in this video, we're going to show you how to set it up. Okay, so the first thing we want to do as a Slack Centro admin, we're going to go to the Centro app. Your view, of course, is going to be very different than the submitter view because you have the full control of these admin settings. Now, let's first go to form setup, and this is where you design the form and add the fields to it and do all the kind of things that you want the end user to see. When we create the form, in this case, I'm connecting as an automation user. We have a lot of videos on the difference between these two, but essentially, automation users leverage a single Salesforce user to create cases, and you don't have to have a bunch of Salesforce seats in order to do this process. We're going to give it a form API name. In this case, I gave it the case submit API name. We can customize the pop-up message that once it's created, what do you display to the user? So if you don't want to show the record name, for example, or a link to it, you can put whatever you want in here. Like we've got your case and we're following up or whatever you want. Of course, then you pick our Salesforce object. I added a few fields. And then there is a little bit of Salesforce setup I would recommend. Maybe not necessary, but I would recommend it. In this case, I've created a few custom fields on the case object, one called case requester ID. And you could leverage an existing field for this. I would just go ahead and create a text 200 field. And then we're going to put in this merge tag user ID to capture the Slack member ID of who started the form, okay? That was going to be really useful for this communication back and forth that you saw in the demo. All right, so that's it on the form side. Now on the workflow setup side, go ahead and click this. And you'll see that we need to just enable this thing called reply added to Salesforce record blocks. Remember I showed you a record block posting to both the triage channel and the case submitter channel. Well, those record blocks are really important to capture the thread and detect, has a new message been added to those Salesforce record blocks. By editing this, we're going to say submit Centro Salesforce form / fire platform event. We're going to select this option. Leave the form blank. We actually don't want to display a form, but we do want to fire a Salesforce platform event. And I'm going to call this event case reply. You'll see how this comes together in a second, but we're going to leverage Salesforce platform events for a lot of what you saw built out in that demo. Okay. So now let's take a look at that platform event. Actually, I think it's important to learn how this works in Workbench. Hopefully Workbench is working for you. It's been somewhat spotty if you have Hyperforce or not, but it's really useful for debugging these platform events should you have it. If you have an alternate solution to it, that's fine too. So go to Workbench, go to streaming push topics, select generic subscriptions, and then put in the subscription /event /centro action __ action _ e, and let's subscribe to it. Now, let's fire a couple of those platform events. The first one will be when we actually create the case. So let's go ahead and create the case. And when we hit the save button and it gets created, that will actually not only create the case, but additionally fire a platform event. We get that for free when we set up that central form. You can see now the platform event has fired, and we get some useful things here, right? So these fields have the Slack channel ID, the username of who fired it, any message text that will become useful in a second, the platform event API name, or the central API name, I should say. This is the case ID. That will be really helpful for figuring out which case to relate this to. And the message timestamp. That's like a unique identifier of every single message inside of Slack. Okay, so now that triggers what we created here is a platform event handler. And this may look a little scary at first, but trust me, it's really easy once you get the hang of it. We will ship this example platform event handler as an unmanaged package that you can put into your system to test out and play with. And it's going to leverage these platform events and everything you saw in the video. So when you create the platform event, you're just going to tie it to the central action. So we ship a platform event with our product. And then router, we're going to create a decision. I like to call them router. And then we have two conditions here, case reply and new case submitted. So let's start with the case submitted side. So remember that this was a person created a case inside of Slack. They filled out the form, they pressed save, and then it kicked off that event I just showed you in Workbench. We're going to look for these conditions. When you put your mouse in here, you'll go down to, it's going to be under record and then API name. And it's just, it behaves very similar to how record triggered flows work in Salesforce. And then we give it the API name that we set up in the form just a few moments ago. Okay, so then that creates that branch. We'll come back to the case reply here in a second. And this branch is going to do a couple things. First, it's going to go get the case. Because the platform event ships in that value field, the case record ID, we're going to go hunt that record ID to get the right one. Then what we're going to do is two central notification posts, one to the Centro team, and of course you can customize the message however you want, but then if we expand attach a record, we can, by the way, I set a variable called case ID to fill in for the post record details. We don't use this record ID, that won't work. You gotta create a custom flow variable for of type text and set it for post the record details and link. So when we link a record in Centro, what that means is we're gonna create a new row in our linked conversations object, which I'll show you in a second. And that's going to capture the case, the Slack channel ID, and the Slack thread ID for reference later on in different flows. Then we're going to name the thread something. This is really important. I'm going to show you why in a second, but keep track of what you name this thread. This thread is called the triage team thread, whereas the other thread can be called, I'll show you here in a second, the post case to DM. We're going to attach a record and call this thread DM to user. I'll show you why those are important in a second. But again, we can remember I saved the submitter ID in the case as a new field. We can use that field value to then @mention that person. You don't have to. It's just a nicety to, call out something to a user specifically. Okay. If you have any questions on any of this, don't hesitate to reach out to us in your Slack Connect channel or support@centro.rocks, of course. Okay. So let's recap what this part of the flow was doing. When we create a case from either the button or from the channel, it's going to fire a platform event. It's going to create the case. And then those two steps, after it catches that in the platform event, post back to the triage team as a record block, as well as to the DM of the user who created it here in their DM with Centro. There might be a question, can we send the DM from the agent themselves? The answer is no. We can't invade your DMs with each other. That's a big no-no in Slack. But what we can do is create some opportunities for the employees to talk to agents through our app, which provides additional information and other functions. So there's some benefit there. But no, we can't jump into your DMs, unfortunately. Or fortunately for everyone, I think. So then, how do we handle the replies? Okay, remember we set up that workflow for handling a new reply message from either side. How does that work? So here is a record block, and here's a thread that we started automatically for you in doing that. So let's say we say hello from Slack DM. That tripped. We look for those message replies under threads, under Centro specifically, and let's look at what Workbench says. It might have timed out. Let's subscribe again and try that again. Okay, we got our message event, our platform event. And here it looks slightly different than the first one, right? Some similarities, we get the Slack user ID of who did the action. And if we were to look, that maps to Hannah's profile. So let's see, her profile ends in 2US. Here's her profile, 2US. Slack channel, that's a DM signature, but we're more interested in this one. The Slack username, we didn't explicitly ask for, but it is captured as a DM or as the ID. And then message text. So remember, I put in Slack here, Slack DM2. It's capturing that text as Slack DM2. Here's the case reply. This is the API name we gave it. And then here is the case ID. Okay, so let's see what happens when we process that platform event. We can use the same platform event we've been working on, but in this time, we're going to go down a different path in our router. New case submitted, API name equals, case reply. So let's go down that branch and see what happens. The first step is figuring out our linked conversations. Remember I told you that in the submission step, we have create a row in the linked conversations table. Well, if you go to the Centro app as an admin and go to linked conversations, you can kind of see what's going on here is for every one of those record block posts, we create a linked conversation. And these should look somewhat familiar. Here we named it DM to user and triage team thread. Remember we named those very specifically. Here's the case record ID for the linked row. Here's the channel ID. Here's the message timestamp. And then Slack member ID is the one who created it. It's not really helpful in this situation. But now we can go look up, okay, where did that message come from? What thread is it tied to is essentially what's going on here. So first, we want to get both. We want to get the linked conversation thread in the triage channel. And remember, those will start with the name triage team. And what we're doing is just a get records on the linked conversation object. We want to look for the record ID, which equals the value that's passed through the platform event, and the name that starts with triage channel. Then you do another lookup for the DM. We want to get both, because we created two record posts, we want to get both of them separately. And if it finds one, that's going to be really helpful for us determining, should we post this to the agent or to the user? So you'll see that here in a second. Then of course we get the case, and then we want to set some variables up. I'll spend a few minutes on this, but essentially name some variables that are really easy to get back at. So the reply user, that's the person who did the reply. That will come through that platform event as a record.Slack member ID. Then we have the variable var reply message, and that equals the message text like I showed you right here. Oops, where'd it go? Slack message. Here is the Slack user ID. We want to get the timestamp from both the triage channel and the DM because we don't know yet which one this came from. And then we do the same for the DM and the triage channel. I won't talk about files too much, but we can process if files have been attached to the thread. And then the submitter ID comes from the case itself. Okay? So then we make a decision. Where did this come from? Do we want to post it? If someone's intending to write to the agent, for example, like we did, the case submitter is trying to type to the agent, we want to post that message straight to the agent in the respective triage channel thread. And what this is doing is saying, if we want to post to the agent, let's look at that thread real quick. The channel ID cannot equal the triage channel ID as identified from our lookup. If it does equal that, that means it came from the triage channel. If it doesn't, that means it's intended to go down that path. And if we want to post the user, just the opposite. It can't equal the DM channel and the message text. In this case, where I showed in the demo, we want to mention the user. You don't have to do that. You can actually just pass any message in that thread straight to the submitter. But sometimes you want to have a private conversation, so this is a nice workaround to that. Okay, so again, I know this is a little complex. You don't have to worry about every single decision in here, but if you do want to modify it, it's probably important that you understand what's going on. You can just use our out-of-box unmanaged package and don't modify a thing. That's totally fine too. Okay, so now if we're in the post to agent thread, let's say that we're coming from the DM of the user and we want to post it to the agent. First, we want to maybe update the case. And in here, I created a couple custom fields. You can have a field called the last message, Slack message snippet, so you don't have to look in the LWC. And you can have the field last Slack reply member to see who was the last person to reply in this message. You can also update the case status to say waiting on customer or customer responded if you have other automations that trip off that status change. So you might want to update the case. You don't have to, of course. And then we're going to simply ignore the check for file piece for a minute, but if we want to go ahead and send to the agent, we're going to post where to the triage channel. Remember, we set that variable up before. We can say from case submitter, here's the ID and the reply message. That's what you saw in the demo, right? So pretty simple. The only trick here is you want to send as a reply and pick the triage timestamp. Okay, and then the same logic applies for posting back to the user. You'll notice though that I had a little bit of a nicety. Again, you don't have to do this, but it is kind of nice. I had this nicety where if a new message comes from the agent, we post to the app, new message on your case. Click here to view. So if you have a lot of cases that you've been submitting, you know which one to connect to, right? So we can click this thread and see that message. So how we did that, this is again a little too probably complex for anyone setting this up for the first time, but just for instructional reasons, we want to maybe make some special assignments here. I'll let you look at those, pause the video. And then we want to send immediately to the reply user that threaded reply. So the first thing we want to do is use this function that we call send immediately to the thread. I'll show you why in a second. When we send immediately with this checkbox and send it as a reply to the DM, what returns is it actually posts a new update into the message, what we call the message queue. The message queue is every single message that goes out from Salesforce Flow to Slack that can be referenced in the flow. So we know exactly what the channel ID and message timestamp are. Then if we want to post to the user, not in the thread, but hey, alert, there's a new thread, click here to view it. I've constructed this nice new message on your case, click here to view. Now it includes this deep link URL formula that has some, you'll have to change this. I will warn, if you want to have this unmanaged package, you'll have to just find your starting URL, and I can show you how to do that, of your Slack workspace, and then append this complex formula that tells it exactly where that URL is. And all I'm talking about there is when I create this post, guess what? It creates this link. You can see I'm just reconstructing this entire URL so it can be clickable within the message. Okay, and then we update the case just like we did before. So, in a nutshell, there's a lot has been covered, but that is how we can create a mirrored conversation between the agent and the end user that doesn't have a direct link between them, but is keeping track of everything, most importantly in Salesforce. So please let us know if you have any questions. Please use the unmanaged package, and we'll see you next time.